Good afternoon and welcome to How to Conduct Thorough and Fair Workplace Investigations. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Raleigh Merrill with GTM Payroll and HR, and in a moment I'll be introducing you to our presenter. But first, feel free to ask questions using the question functionality button that you'll see up towards the upper right of your screen. There's a question mark and a little square there. You can ask questions along the way, and we'll get to as many of those questions as time permits today at the end of this presentation. If we don't get to your particular question, we'll be sure to follow up with you in the next day. Also, you'll receive an email later today with a link to watch a recording of today's session, as well as a PDF version of this presentation. And now our presenter. Our presenter is Deana Prest. Deana has more than 35 years of extensive senior level HR experience. Deana's role as an HR consultant has included the critical areas of workplace investigations, particularly those involving discrimination, harassment, safety, and Title IX. She's earned her professional in human resources and senior certified professional certifications from the Society of Human Resource Management. It is my pleasure now to introduce you and turn things over to our HR consultant, senior HR consultant, Deana Prest.
Thanks, Raleigh, and thank you for everyone for joining us this afternoon. Often when we think about workplace investigations, our thoughts go to harassment claims. But there are many reasons you may need to conduct a workplace investigation. Issues such as discrimination, as Raleigh said, safety violations, substance abuse, or employee conduct issues. The first question, we should be asking when a complaint is received is whether or not a workplace policy or labor law has been violated. Not all complaints are going to lead to an investigation, and that's an important point to remember as you're heading into your first investigation. For example, you could receive a complaint from an employee alleging that their supervisor is harassing them, singling them out by scheduling weekly meetings to review their progress towards deadlines, things of that nature. This is not a harassment claim. This is a supervisory issue and a performance issue. So just wanting to make the point that not all complaints will lead to an investigation, and making that distinction is important. When to conduct a workplace investigation, the reasons why we would do that would be to resolve internal issues, advise counsel, and develop organizational leaders to make better managers, make better decisions, increase the engagement of our employees by providing confidential channels to address employee concerns, and protecting the organization from lawsuits and safeguarding their assets. When we're faced with a complaint from an employee, it's important to understand that the organization may have failed this employee in some way. It's taken a great deal of courage for this employee to come forward and to initiate this conversation. So our next steps to resolve this issue will be critical. As HR professionals or leaders in the organization, we have a responsibility to resolve these internal issues for our employees. The why behind conducting workplace investigations often have to do with potentially reducing the risk of government intervention, mitigate litigation, or limit damages as a result of lawsuits. Workplace investigations can be an effective tool for preventing or reducing the effects of government intervention, such as a DOL audit. It can be critical in uncovering and stopping employee misconduct. It can reveal weaknesses in employer policies, procedures, or processes. It can limit liability for the organization and its leaders, and it can ensure a safe and enjoyable work experience and environment for all of your employees. Workplace investigation trends have been changing in the last several years. As I mentioned earlier, investigations have gone well beyond what we've typically seen in the past. They can be complex, and the original complaint can lead to new revelations about other allegations of wrongdoing. Be prepared to follow the investigation wherever the information leads. Having a policy in place, having a process in place is going to be your best defense and the best way to be prepared for what comes next. Preparing for your next investigation, as I said, should include having policies and procedures in place so that employees know what the process looks like and how to go about that. A written process and procedure should be in place, a process of how complaint investigations will be conducted if it's deemed to be required. A complaint form that's easily accessible to all employees is important, and understanding of complaints that require an investigation. Conduct a thorough investigation or interview of the accuser and the initial witness, asking who, what, where, how, and why. Reiterate the need for the employee to cooperate in maintaining discretion and ensuring that no one experiences retaliation. However, be aware that overly broad confidentiality rules can be deemed unlawful if they restrict the employee's ability to discuss the terms and conditions of their employment. After reviewing your notes and conducting interviews with those involved, always ask if there's anything else that the person that you're interviewing wants to add. Always ask the accusers and the witnesses to put their claims in writing. Work with legal counsel to decide whether sworn or signed statements are needed, and assess what additional help you'll need for the investigation. Consult with legal in all allegations that include claims of discrimination, harassment, or workplace violence. Identify who you need to speak with and what questions you'll ask. Being prepared for that interview will set you up for success in your next investigation. Some best practices for conducting workplace investigations include establishing goals for the investigation at the onset, assessing what the complaint is, carrying out the investigation in a fair and objective manner. It's important to go into an investigation with an open mind and not try to reach any conclusions or allow any biases to work their way in ahead of reaching your conclusion. Respecting the privacy and confidentiality of those involved in the information that you receive, conducting detailed interviews, and taking action if the complaint is substantiated. That follow-through is critical. Interviewing the accused or potentially involved persons with a view toward finding out what happened. Again, don't pick sides. Conduct an impartial investigation and interview all parties. Re-interview those involved based on new information or evidence that comes to light. Keep good notes of your interviews, responses, dates, times, efforts, results, actions, and refusals. Assume all documents will be seen by a judge or jury. Avoid gratuitous conclusions or speculations while you're in the process. And only write down or record what you were told and what you saw, those firsthand accounts. Assess the credibility of those involved and resolve factual disputes. It's important to also keep secondary performance issues separate from your investigation. Some of the framework in terms of how to conduct a workplace investigation involve taking action to stop the suspect conduct. If there's employee misconduct that's being alleged, it needs to be isolated, and you may want to put someone on administrative leave if that's the case. Put out the fire first is where we're going here. The more severe the claim or the emotions involved, the more care may be needed to keep employees separate or safe from any further threats, retaliation, or harassment while you conduct your investigation. Stabilize the workplace and hold off on any discipline until the investigation is complete. Again, you want to remain neutral and not reach any conclusions. And reinforce the company's no retaliation policy at that point. Determine whether or not to conduct the investigation. Once you've put a pause on the behavior, determine whether or not an investigation is warranted. And choose the right person to conduct the investigation. If it's a process or procedure issue, a supervisor or a manager may be appropriate to conduct an investigation. If it involves potential legal matters, you may want to consult counsel. Determine whether or not to involve someone outside of the organization will be determined by the severity of the claim. The next step is to determine whether to impose restrictions on employee activity. As we said, putting a pause on the behavior is important if it's having negative effects. Craft the investigation to address a specific target audience. Understand who that report, your final report, is going to go to, and have that in mind when you start writing your report. Interview the complaining witness and interview the employee whom the allegations were made against. Developing a plan for your investigation will be key to its success. Before getting started, identify who is leading or authorizing the investigation. Identify the employees who have filed the complaint, which is not always clear if you're not requiring it to be in writing. Who are the allegations being made against, and what are the goals for your investigation? Who will you be submitting those findings of your investigation to? These all sound like pretty straightforward questions, but the answers are not always as obvious as they sound and can undermine the investigation if you don't identify these roles early on. The order in which you interview those involved matters. Speaking with the complainant first ensures you have all the relevant information about the complaint. Witnesses then provide another perspective, either corroborating or contradicting the claimant's account. The accused is usually interviewed last, so you have the full picture before the final interview. Follow-up interviews can be necessary if new information comes to light during the course of your investigation. Deciding on an in-house or a third-party investigator, again, will be important depending on the severity of or the pervasiveness of the complaint that you receive. If you're wanting to handle it in-house, You need to assess if you have the experience in-house to conduct it. Can that individual be objective? Could there be a fear of retaliation or having someone interfere or direct the outcome of your investigation? A third-party investigator should be considered if additional experience is required to navigate the process. If the person cannot be objective throughout the process, that would also indicate the need for a third-party investigator. Someone who can make recommendations for policy changes, training, discipline, or termination of employment will also be necessary. Understanding when to consult with legal counsel is also important. It's the best practice to establish the authority internally to assign an investigator in a policy document approved by leadership before the first investigation is undertaken. Often this person is the compliance officer, human resources manager, or legal counsel, depending on the nature of the complaint. Decide who will evaluate complaints, allegations, or other information received to determine whether the allegation warrants an investigation. Deciding whether to handle an investigation in-house versus seeking a third-party investigator will largely depend, again, on the severity of the allegation and the position held by the accused. Assessing the potential liability of the claim and the potential for possible retaliation will also be guiding factors. As those of us in HR understand, the importance of communication is a thread that we follow through much of the work that we do. Whenever there is conflict or a crisis, it often has originated in poor communication or a lack of communication. It's important to acknowledge to the complainant when you've received a complaint. Identify who the point person or the principal in the company is, and discussing the scope of the investigation are all going to be important first steps. Understand and manage the disruption that an investigation is going to have on your organization. And if you need to advise the accused or the claimant to have no contact during the investigation, that needs to be communicated early on in the process. Information will be shared on a need-to-know basis internally. Regular updates with the principal or whoever's guiding the investigation will be important, and involving legal counsel, as we said, if there are legal issues involved in the complaint. Whether the investigation is to be handled in-house or by an outside resource, communicating with those involved must be prioritized. Identifying who will be responsible for communication and balancing confidentiality with a reasonable explanation will be important to minimize the disruption of the investigation. Preserving the integrity of the investigation will also be a priority. The order of the investigation and the process that you follow will need to be thought out and clearly documented. You need to maintain objectivity and perseverance. As we talked about on the last slide, confirming that you've received a verbal or written complaint to the complainant. Understanding the confidentiality and discussing the investigation internally needs to be considered. Any retaliation needs to be reported. Leave that channel open to your employees that are involved in the investigation so that you're aware of that. and following the course of the information that you've obtained and examining all information. Again, having a plan and a policy in place before your next complaint is received will go a long way to ensuring the investigation will be thorough and fair. Identify a member of the leadership team to partner with the investigator. This team will combine the appropriate authority with the expertise needed to ensure a successful investigation. Reaching a determination is the goal of the investigation. By not reaching a determination, we don't resolve the issue, and that reaching a determination is key. Once you've weighed the information and the risks of not reaching a conclusion, you'll understand that some determination needs to be made. The investigation is not complete until you've reached a conclusion. Completing a written report with the determination, again, that documentation is critical. Reviewing the report with the company principal or whoever is leading the investigation, and outlining what the responsibilities of the company is moving forward following the determination. The goal of an investigation is to determine whether or not the facts support the allegations set out in the complaint. The investigator's report will outline their determination, how the determination was reached, accompanied by the supporting statements and a summary report of the investigation, which you'll confirm with senior management and legal counsel in the final course of action. After the report is written and delivered to senior management, you'll want to identify the follow-up responsibilities, who will be responsible for notifying the complainant and the accused of the results of the investigation, making sure that you review retaliation with everyone involved, making sure that everyone understands that the company is aware of the possibility of retaliation and will take action. The company needs to set workplace expectations following the investigation and identify if there are any policy or policy changes or training required following the conclusion of the investigation. Follow up as needed on the effectiveness of any corrective actions, be alert to retaliation claims, and follow up on those as well. If you find that there is no probable cause due to one employee's word versus another, advise the accused that if a similar issue arises again, the first incident will be taken into consideration during a new investigation. All of those points will be important to ensuring that the results of your investigation have a positive effect on the organization and the employee's experience. At this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Raleigh and see if there are any questions.
Thanks, Deana. And before we get to questions, just a quick word about GTM's Workplace Investigation Service. If you outsource your investigation to GTM, we can provide an independent, unbiased, and seasoned HR professional like Deana who works with your organization. As soon as you inform us of an employment situation that requires an internal investigation, the assigned HR consultant will contact the principal official of your organization the very same business day. The HR consultant will review the complaint, schedule and conduct interviews, thoroughly review the documents, and complete a comprehensive written report with recommendations for the next steps. Then the GTM HR consultant will review the report with the principal official and report the determination to the claimant and the accused. All reports resulting from a workplace investigation will be reviewed by a GTM HR consultant practice leader before being submitted to the organization. To ensure the report is complete, the determination is based on facts and gathered during the investigation, and the findings are aligned with federal, state, and local laws and organizational policies. So now let's move on to your questions. We had one come through in the sign up process, and we'll get to that one first. And the question is this, Deana: can an employer deny an employee the opportunity to have an attorney present during an investigation interview?
Yes, I've had that come up before. Um, if the employer has a policy about whether or not an employee can have a representative present during an investigation, during an interview, or if the employer is a unionized employer and there's a collective bargaining agreement that speaks to this issue. Unless either of those things are present, then the investigator does not have to allow an attorney or a representative to join their interview. I have allowed it to happen in the past where the person I was interviewing felt more comfortable having someone present. However, I did make it clear that their participation was going to be limited to their listening to the interview, not participating, not guiding the responses. So there's a way to reach a balance there as well.
Okay, thank you. So now we have no questions submitted yet by our participants today, and I find that surprising because we have a lot of interest. A lot of people signed up today. So take a moment. Again, I remind you, you can ask a question simply by going up towards the upper right of your screen. You'll see that question mark inside that box. Just click on that and you can type in a question for us right now. We'll give you a moment or two to see if we get some questions pop up and challenge Deana a little bit more. She shared a lot of information today. Well, while we await, see if we get a question, we'll tell you this. You can continue the conversation with Deana at any time. There's her contact information on the screen. And there's also Martin Patrick. He's our HR consultant leader, and you can talk to him as well. Oh, here comes a question. What is the responsibility of an employer to investigate? Oh, it popped away on me here. Sorry, folks. What is the responsibility of an employer to investigate an informational complaint or an informal complaint, that is, if the complainant wants to avoid an investigation? So, what's the responsibility of the employer to investigate an informal complaint if the complainant wants to avoid an investigation? Do you have a response for us, Deana?
I do. I think anyone who's worked in the HR field for any period of time has had an employee come into their office and say, I need to tell you something, but I need you to keep it confidential, or I don't want it to go anywhere. That's not a luxury that we have. If an employee shares something with you, whether you're an HR professional or in management in some capacity, you have a responsibility to the organization if that information includes any wrongdoing by an employee or a situation that puts your employees in an uncomfortable situation, whether it's harassment, discrimination, any of those sorts of issues. And you need to follow the information and follow up on it. The employee doesn't have, the employee's coming to you for a reason, and you may not have the luxury of granting them that informal meeting without following up on it. There is a responsibility on the organization, the employer's part, to follow up on any of that information.
And if an employer is faced with that situation, they're not really sure what to do or they want to double check, they can certainly reach out to you for ask a question and for advice and possibly engage with you and GTM. I thank you very much, Deana. We appreciate all that you've done with us today, the information you've shared. Uh, that's all the time we have for the questions right now. Thanks for sharing your expertise, Deana. All of
Thank
our
you.
attendees, if you'd like to reach out with questions, there's Deana's contact information there, and Martin Patrick from our HR consulting team as well. And if you want to dive deeper into all of this, go ahead and reach out directly. Thanks for joining us today. Be sure to look for that email link that we'll be sending you today with a recording of this session and a PDF version of today's presentation. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.